Oh, mate.
Have you got a watch? Really? Grab the stick.
Okay, shall I start then? Okay, I think it's probably worth me giving you a bit of background of who I am. And Stu said that I'm a lecturer on the graphic design course. Further than that, I'm pretty fresh into the university. I only joined in September. Other than that, I had 18 years experience working across the Midlands in a series of different design agencies, working on a very broad mix of brands and subject areas, project areas. So in my past, I don't know anything to show you from my historic work, but I've done stuff for interiors, which is building some sort of small level furniture exhibitions, and also all the way through to big branding projects for people like Eon and BT, and also smaller people like Nottingham Playhouse, for promotional work, etc. So it's been a real mix. So I'm not, strictly speaking, a web expert. I'm coming from more of a holistic creative background, where I've dealt with a lot of different project areas and just applied my process and creative thinking to that. And web has just been one of those. Obviously, there's a different set of technologies and techniques and stuff like that you have to consider, but that's, with experience you'll get that. So in historically, when I've worked on online stuff and web stuff, and more and more over the last sort of 2-3 years, it's been more and more more of a focus for businesses, and some of our big clients were shifting to sort of 70% of their communication online, which is, you can see from a design point of view, from a graphic design point of view, or an ad agency point of view, that's something you have to react to. So in the way that I've worked in the past, I've been sort of the designer, and then I've always worked with a developer. I don't know much about code. I'm aware of the different languages, different coding types, but I could not sit down and code. Now, increasingly now, those two roles are coming much closer together. But I've never worked in the way, and don't ask me about code. I can deal with aesthetics, I can deal with functionality, and sit down on that. But I can't deal with, actually getting something to work back end and dealing with the code. So please don't ask me questions about that. You can ask me about anything else, but not that. Don't come in, mate. Sorry, right, go see. And I think, I'm completely fresh to your course as well. I don't know anything about it. I've had a few conversations with Stuart about, more on a personal level. He's my mentor at the moment, so that's why we got in contact, and that's why I'm here today. So I don't know too much about the course. So I'm going to take you through, forgive me if it's telling you to suck eggs, but I'm going to tell you how I would approach any creative project, websites being one of that, and then add on to the back of it. I'm going to tell you the overall process of building a website and designing a website, but I'm also going to tell you how I would approach it if I got a job like this that landed on my desk, okay? That makes sense? Yeah. These are just tips. This thing that's been handed out, these are just tips. This sort of weaves through everything I'm going to talk about, but this will sort of reference back for you at a later date. Like Stu said, there is a few copies of these kicking around this presentation, but I will make it available for you through Stuart, and also I'm going to give you some assets, some digital assets, which are Photoshop file templates, which are just really rough creations of websites in Photoshop. Okay. So, this is the process that we tend to go through when we're doing any website. So, and most of this is probably going to apply to some of the stuff you do as well. I'm going to really talk to you about the two front areas, so defining and design. I talked to you a little bit about the build, but like I say, I'm not a programmer, so I don't actually build a site. There's obviously ways of doing it, which I'll talk to you about later on. And then managing it is the ongoing thing about SEO and stuff like that. I'm not going to even talk to you about that. But that's the process that we go through creating a website, and the managing thing, that's ongoing all the time, yeah? Okay. So, define. This is probably, I imagine, without knowing too much about your course, I imagine this is going to be exactly as you work. And I'm hoping this is not going to be too much of a removal from stuff that you're already doing. But I'm just going to give you my slant on it, and hopefully that will help. I might say a few things that might just be a little bit different to how you work. So the most important thing, and the idea of defining it, is setting the groundwork up to making sure that the rest of what you do throughout the whole of this design project is solid and it's based on what the client wants and what's achievable. So in the brief, obviously a client will probably give you a brief, or should hopefully give you a brief, and forgive me for saying this, 9 times out of 10 clients' briefs don't go far enough because they're so entrenched in their own world. They don't think about telling you the little nuances of a brief that you really need that can elevate your design and elevate your thinking in special ways. So when you get a client, when you get from a brief, obviously we wanted to know that as much as you can about their business. So you want to know their functionality, what they do, what they offer, what's their tone of voice, how they speak to their customers, who are their customers. This is a really important thing. So who is their target audience? And then try and define that in your own mind and get a picture of that. And that is a really important thing to do because that should influence everything you do through the whole of the project. To even down to the way that you design it, the look and feel, even the way that you interact with it. So it's really important that you do that. And also try and get some of the more functionality things. What do they actually want it to do? Do they want it to sell, or do they want it to be a showcase, or is it just a blog? So they can reach out to people and just have a presence. So in the briefing part of any project, I think it's really important that you ask questions. And I don't think any client will ever be disrespectful about you if you're just inquisitive about their business. So try and dig deep, ask lots of questions. So that's the first thing, is making sure that the brief is really solid and really tight. You can always go back to that. At any time of the project, always come back to the brief. If you get stuck or you're questioning what you're doing, always come back to the brief. And the second thing is, if you are working with an existing brand, then find out as much about that as you can, because it's really important to make sure that what you do fits in with their brand platform, with their look and feel. So obviously working with their logo, working with their colour scheme, and you can see that brands have very broad facets to their brand, even down to the way that they write. So that, the way they speak to their customers and the tone of voice that they use is all really entrenched in it. And you probably have not thought about it, but you will be exposed to this sort of stuff all the time. So when you start off, this is about defining what you know about that brand to make sure that it influences everything you do. So if they talk to their client, their target audience in a very chatty way, then your website needs to reflect that, but both in the tone that it's written and also perhaps the visual side of it and the way that it interacts with them. But also they might be more serious, so then you want to change your tone of voice, the way you communicate, to a more serious way. Does that all make sense? And the sort of final, I'm going through this at a real speed. I hope it makes sense, but feel free to ask questions at the end, or just pipe up whenever you want, it's fine. The sort of final stage of it is defining the architecture of it. So that's about working out how this site sits together. This is one I've just found off the internet. So it's about working out how all those pages link together, how much content there is, where you want a user to go from one page to another, and it's all about so that you're getting a real, not a tangible, but a real, not even a physical sense, but you're getting a sense of how it's all going to come together and what you've got to deal with as a body. Yeah, this will then always influence then all the little design decisions that you make later on. It will influence those because you have to keep sanity checking all this stuff back to this. Am I ticking off all this? Is it going to fulfil the architecture? Am I going to be able to deliver all these different elements through what I'm designing? Okay. So then we can move on to the design stage. I think first and foremost, like I say, I don't know how you guys work, but this is how I would approach it. Before you do anything at all, you want to go and start doing some research and referencing stuff. So, going not only looking at looking at your particular client's brand, but you want to look at their competitors' brand. Look at what they're doing. How are they communicating? What you're doing as a website designer or any designer, when you're doing any communication online or off, is you're pitching or you're competing one brand against another. So you need to be aware of what all the other people are doing. So that's one thing to look at. And this is all about soaking stuff up. So I'd say to the graphic design students, you need to be like a sponge. So you need to be constantly looking at stuff. And then that influences stuff as you influences your work and your output as you go through any project at all. So this stage here, which I'm calling look, collect and think, is about looking at competitors in the brand, but also looking at just random stuff, artists and web stuff that, looking at websites that you think are really good and think how you interact with it. Think about the palette of colours, the fonts, the type of photography and all this sort of thing, that all these little nuances to the design of a website that makes a big difference. And just think about everything you can think that could influence that, and just store that ready for the next stage. Okay.
It should be your inspire blog. All the things that we've talked about in this session that says look at stuff that you think looks good. For me, it doesn't matter whether it's architecture, dresses, textures, colours, fabrics, things that you think are interesting because they have a particular flavour about them.
Yeah. That's fine. No, when I say to the graphic design students, they look in a very sort of pocket of what they think's relative to that particular project. So if they're doing a magazine design and all they do is look at magazines, they're going to produce something that looks like those magazines. What we want to do is to get some standouts, some difference, so people are interested in it, is creative. We need to look further afield, and that's exactly what Stuart's saying, is you need to pull in and designers, Michael Beirut, which is a graphic designer that you're probably not aware of, but he's written lots of stuff about designers ought to be looking at more like art, at dance, all these other things where you're pulling in reference and stuff that just twists your work and takes your work into different areas. And I think that's this idea, is just put lots of stuff in your mind, be aware of things and look at things. It's quite surprising when you walk around, you probably don't take a lot of stuff in, but I think just be more aware of it. Okay. So what do we do with all that stuff when we've got it all? And I imagine this might be how you guys work, so I'm not privy to that. But what we do is then we create a big mood board. So we get all these things that we like, we think they're relevant, think that that are maybe a little bit off a tangent. We stick them down. We put them onto a big mood board. And you might even want to say in your mind that this brand's got 4 words that you're trying to say. Is it, eye for detail? Is it sophistication? Is it craft? And you might stand back and say, well, is this mood board saying that? If it is or isn't, then you might want to add some more stuff and think about things in a different way. What the idea is then, what you should do is then take your design, put that into the middle of the mood board, and it should feel like it sits in there. It should feel right, yeah? And these are all sort of things that you need to do before you actually pick up a pencil to start actually designing. It's about building like layers of foundations, layers of knowledge and understanding and referencing before you can actually step on and actually start to design things. So one of the most important things with any website is the navigation. So again, you'll be exposed to this on a daily basis and probably haven't actually thought about it. You've probably experienced good navigation and bad navigation, but you've not actually thought, why is that good and why is that bad? And this is the part where you need to go back to in your referencing stage and go and actually sit on websites and think, how's this website getting me from A to B? If it's bad navigation, you'll be off that site like that because it will just be frustrated. If it's good navigation, then you'll more likely spend a lot more time on it. There's some rule somewhere that somebody said that information should only be 3 clicks away. So anywhere on that site, that person needs to be 3 clicks away from finding absolutely everything. So if you use that as a rule of thumb, you can sort of apply to that You know, if you're expecting somebody to click down 5 or 6 or 7 or even more layers of information to find something that's really important, because everything on that website should be important. It should have a communication and a purpose. You know, if you're limiting the exposability, if that's the right way of saying it, of that person getting into that information. So navigation, I'm not saying you necessarily have to do anything with this stage of designing, but you need to be thinking about it. You need to be looking at navigation and really analysing it and being critical of it. Okay? There's lots, well, broken down into some sort of very sort of basic navigation types. You've got horizontal, which is horizontal navigation. You've got vertical, which is vertical navigation. You've got drop downs, which can come in lots of different forms now. The web, the online stuff is just changing all the time. With HTML5 and dynamic stuff, it's just rapidly changing. And so you can get, these are quite the more old-fashioned ways of drop down. So you hover over it, comes down, the water falls down. But you've also got these sort of more elusive ones of, you know, this little icon here, which is becoming like the sort of zeitgeist for the drop-down menu. So you might see a lot of sites with this in a corner, which is actually indicating there's more drop-down. But you've probably not noticed or not thought, well, I know that's a drop-down. It's there, and it's dripping into something. It's cycling. And then that can happen anyway. It could open out, it could zoom out, it could expand. You know, so that's really sits under drop-downs, but it can be anything. It can be very dynamic. Yeah. And then you've got something called breadcrumbs. Does everyone know what breadcrumbs are? Breadcrumbs are a good way of getting back. So you find, and particularly the Apple side does it well here. So you can see this is where you've been. You started at home, you went to Shop Mac, you went to Mac Accessories, and now you're audio speakers. Again, you probably use this, but not actually knowing what the name is. So this is a breadcrumb trail. So what that allows you to do is see where you are, but also go back very quickly. Okay. So the sort of, in very broad terms, the navigational types that are out there. Again, you need to look. I'm making very generic sweeps over this sort of stuff. There's a lot of different things out there, particularly with how technology is advancing. It's changing all the time. The coding, the CSS and the HTML5 and all this sort of thing, it's changing websites on a weekly basis and what they can do. Okay. So once you've got all that in your mind, and you've got not necessarily got any fixed ideas, because I don't think you should have fixed ideas at that stage, but you should be starting to connect all this stuff up, all your mood boards, all your stuff from the referencing, this mental picture of your target audience, so you know, getting into their mindset, their lifestyle, where else do they go, where else do they visit, you know, what other things do they buy, where do they shop online, and so you're building a mental picture. Then you can start to design it. And I think the first, and this is really important, is you don't just go straight onto the Apple Mac or the PC and start tapping away, because it's a very sterile, prescriptive environment. The pencil is always the way to design things. You can solve problems with a pencil so much quicker, so much more fluidly than you can on a Mac. So at this stage, it's about then getting down ideas, just lots of ideas. We can navigation this, we could have a big picture there, we could do this, we could do that, and you know, annotate things. They don't have to be really well crafted, but they need to be enough so you can get your ideas down there. So this is, for me, this is where the fun starts. This is where it gets a bit more exciting, and you can start to, you know, really express your creativity and what you want to do with it. Can you see how it's all building up? Yeah. So once we've got that, and we've perhaps, you know, this, you probably wouldn't share this with the client. This will be something you do internally, or between a group, or a director, or you know. This is I'm going to give you this as well. This is just so you've got a bit more information. If you're going to do any sort of template size, this is a sort of the size that you should really, is a generic fit-all starting point, and that's the size that you should be going to. So if you, what software do you use? Are you using Photoshop or Illustrator? If you set it into the right mode, so if you set it into online or web, it will do everything in measurements of pixels, px. So that's the start point. So when you start to do this, so once you've got your sketches down, if you then create a document this size, which is a good start point. Obviously, we all know that all the different devices we interact with websites are all massively different, from your iPhone to your tablet to your computer, then to even to your TV screen and bigger. So they're all very different proportions. But if this is a good starting point where you can sort of really get the basics of the design sorted. And you can see these pink blocks in there, that's about still having some rigidity in there, some grids. And this is about working with aesthetics and just making sure that it's not too random, it's not too disjointed, but there is still some rigidity in there that help people digest that website. Yeah? So, some visuals, and I've not done these are just things that I've pulled offline to give you some examples of stuff. But this is what you should be aiming towards to show the client. And this is really achievable. So this is a blog site. This is about thinking them back to what the client needs and the client's requirements are. This is a blog. They might just want an online presence where they can keep in very daily, hourly contact with their clients, so they're in their psyche all the time, so they can post interesting stuff what they're doing. This is a blog site, but it still looks quite nice. It's got this horizontal navigation going off there, and then as you scroll down, you've got lots more information underneath. What you do need to be super aware of is designing above the fold. So this section here, make sure that anything that you want to be seen straight first and foremost is above that fold. So don't put a big picture then with a very piece of copy down here, because there's just people won't see it. They see a lovely picture and they click on because it doesn't mean anything. So it's about communicating and making sure you're communicating and getting your message, whatever that is, and that'll be dictated to by the brand or the company you're designing for, making sure that's first and foremost. Obviously, the obvious thing is to put everything up on top in a bar across there. That really works. It's really effective. It can be a bit sterile, and this does feel a bit formulaic, a bit perhaps too structured, but it does the job. I think here also you've got to think about where your eye goes, and I think there's some notion of what rule of thirds is. Rule of thirds works for website stuff, and also there's an a theory called F vision. It's basically your eye sees in this sort of area first. So that's where you put a lot of really important information. So that's why a lot of companies put their logo top left, because it's probably the most obvious place. And if for some reason you've got a browser window that's this big, you're still going to get the logo. So there's some functionality, some just good practice there. Yeah. That's a blog. But then there's nothing to say that it all has to be photographic. It can, the web, and hopefully you'll notice this as you look at websites, etc. It's changing all the time, and it is, brands actually build from the web up. 5 years ago, brands were, the website was a bolt-on. Now, and as you probably appreciate, businesses and stuff are a lot more online, so they build their brand from the web up, from online stuff upwards. So that means, that could mean it could be very sterile, but it doesn't. It means you can still be playful with it, and still be, very individual out there. It's even more reason to be individual, more reason to push the boundaries of design and what you think you can do and can't do. So you could even do something that's very flat, and there's a move towards this. The old-fashioned design. If you think about your phone, and I'm talking about the Apple interface particularly. 3 years ago, it was very round. It got loads of bevels and stuff. That was how everybody did it. Apple tends to set the trends in this, but and that was something called skeuomorphic. So all those fancy little bevels and stuff. That was a skeuomorphic look. There's a move now to flat design, and that's done for a couple of reasons: speed, but also it's just more interesting, and it's just, I think looking back at that, the old stuff, the skeuomorphic stuff, it just felt a bit dated now. So there's a move now. It's going to change again. It might change in 12 months when Apple re-release their new operating system on the iPhone or whatever. But there's a movement towards flat design, and big trends this year are going to be really bright colours. So you might see lots of websites coming out. Currently, there's a lot of websites doing full bleed images when you go on. the next big thing is supposed to be really bright, lucid colours. Okay? So you can see how quickly it changes. And you can be playful with it as well. You know, don't think it's just got to be a logo and a little bit of navigation. You can engage with your user in whatever way you think, and it's about that personality of the brand. I'm not saying this is right for you know, for a big corporate. I don't think they do that, but this might be right for a nice little design agency where they are a little bit quick and a little bit left field, so they can do something like that. So I guess what I'm saying is, be creative. Don't think you've just got to follow this formulaic column of text, picture, navigation. It can be more fluid and more creative than that. And this is, again, I've just spoke about this, but this is a current thing that a lot of people are doing. You've probably seen it happen a lot. Full bleed images is a big thing at the moment, and also the slider. You can see this has got a slider on it, so it's rotating through a series of images. And this, they do that. It's done in a dynamic way to keep the user engaged and actually interested in it. So it's moving all the time, so they know it's still there. It's in their mindset. You can see it's really simple, this site, but it's just really bold imagery. They've got this. They're using this little icon here, which is to denote the navigation. So they're cleaning their website up by using just really small iconography. And as you flick through, so the next page here, so when you do click on that, that's what happens. So this is obviously another page, another image, so that's scrolled through by the time I managed to capture it. But once you clicked on that little icon, it just dynamically grew out there. You've got this really tiny, small, subtle navigation, which then you can click on and disappear, click on and let it disappear again. So it's about thinking in challenging ways and doing some interesting stuff with it. Okay. Again, this is another big, large image website, and you see the Apple site, very simple, clean. You know, I'm saying all this stuff about making it interesting, but I think simplicity is a really core thing to good design. The simpler you can do it and still communicate what you want to communicate, the better. So I think, you know, all this thing about making, you know, all these whiz and bangs that the internet can do, I think there is still an element of good design that is simple. It's interesting with this, how far, and you probably don't see this or don't even notice, and it's only when you stop and think that you actually do notice these things, that how far the internet's come in the last 2 years. So, you know, 2 years ago you wouldn't have been able to click on a box and get another floating palette over there where you can explore more information. This is a form of navigation. So, you know, just be mindful, and I think the thing is just to keep looking, and keep looking not in terms of what am I going to buy, but look at how things are built and how they interact and how dynamic they are. I think this is the final one. So yeah, you can be quite abstract with stuff and have mixed media. And it's unfortunately this is obviously a still, but all these squares actually move at different times. So you've got video in some of them, you've got animated GIFs and stuff like that happening. So, but it's really interesting just to sit and watch it. It's really interactive without actually digging further, burying further into the information. That homepage is really interesting. And I think it's that idea of just making sure it's engaging visually. So when you click on it, that it's interesting, it spikes your interest. All this is designed with a particular end user and target audience in mind. And I'd probably pick stuff that is more in line with me. I like the Apple stuff and this, and it's more to my taste. So I'm a target audience of somebody, and I've picked stuff that's suitable to me, and that's the same for you. But what's important is you don't design a website for you, you're designing for a client, and you understand their client's target audience. So they might not be really web savvy, you know, interested in a lot of dynamic stuff. I mean, they might just want to sell widgets to people, and that's what they want to do. But you have to design, that's when clever design, well, good designers can put their self into the mindset, into the lifestyle of other users and other people, and design to those needs. That's what a good designer is. Not about applying an aesthetic that's really, you know, really current at the moment. It's about being able to do the right thing for the right audience, to communicate in the right way. And this is just another one with an example that I like. This is a single page website, so it's just all in one stream, so you don't actually, it never pushes you out of this one single page, but it navigates down. And you've probably seen this is quite just another trend. So you click on that arrow, and it'll just sweep you down through the page. That's called a single page, and that's you know, see that happening quite a lot. It's really a simple way of designing it, and just accessing the information. I quite like that. Again, they're using the same iconography for the menu. So the build, so that's all about the preparation work and then the actual designing stuff of it. Now, I don't think you guys will get involved with the building of it, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the couple of very simplified routes of how you do build websites. All those visuals, just so you know, are all created in Photoshop. So that's where you create a lot of your visuals that you're going to present onto the client. So all those things I've just talked to you about, they were all created in Photoshop and then given to a developer, and they will bring them to life with images, HTML, blocks of colour, etc. So I'm going to give you a couple of Photoshop templates where it just shows you how somebody would create. They're not very interesting designs, but it will show you how somebody would create in Photoshop all the different elements to bring a website to life. So hopefully that will help you if you visualise something for a client. You can refer back to it. Okay? So the build side of it, there's two ways. There's building from the floor up, so it's completely you know, no coding, you're generating everything. And this, I'm saying here that you would use in CreateSuite, but I've worked with developers that use £25 pieces of software off the internet, and well, that's all they use. But for me, I'm what you see is what you get person. So I'm a visual person, so you know, things like Dreamweaver and stuff, that's what they do. Other guys and the proper developers will just sit looking at code all day, and that will just put me to sleep. But you know, the elements from a building, a build up from the floor website would be, in one instance, would be at some point you probably use the CreateSuite to generate images, but you would use Photoshop for generating your images. You'd use Illustrator for doing graphics, maybe typography and stuff like that, and Dreamweaver to put it all together to actually build the website. And that suite is a more designer orientated way of producing websites. So that's if you've got nothing at all and you just want to build it from fresh. The other way of doing it, and a lot of the developers I worked with a couple of last year and stuff, they were using templates, themes, and you might have, if you've got your own online presence, etc., you might have run it. That's how I run my website. Is a theme, and they will then go into the code of the theme and do what they wanted to do. Get it, tweak it, to move dynamically in different ways, shift things about. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that, and these aren't by any stretch of the imagination the only two. You've got WordPress and Squarespace, and then if you go onto either of those websites, there's thousands of templates that you can buy for $40, $50 and put your content into that, so your images, etc. And more and more people are doing it that way. And it's what it does, it allows you to manage your content. So it's a content management system. So you can put in different images, you can update things. You're not relying on a developer to, you know, change some copy or whatever. You can actually get on and do it through a back-end interface where you can drop an image in, update it, and so your site's changed in a matter of seconds. Okay. So they're the two sort of ways that, in a very broad strokes, that websites are created. The really good developers will probably work with WordPress or Squarespace and just really get into the code of it and really change it to do what you want. But that's for me, that would be a good starting point for you to go and have a look at these websites on there, because you can just buy one and buy a URL and get your personal online presence up and running. I think that's something you ought to do anyway. I think, you know, as I know as a graphic designer that's going into industry, you know, the first thing we'll do is we'll get a CV, so we'll look at, you know, and read a little bit about them, but then we'll be straight onto their online presence to have a look at their work. And I imagine it's the same for you. Forgive me if that's not the case, but you know, I think that's really important that you start to do that. We push our students at year 2 to start it.
You know, so hopefully by the end of year 3 they've got something that's really, really nice and really slick. And that's a lot of what they do, and the way I've done my site is through WordPress. So that's the 2 ways of building it. I'm not sure you're going to get so heavily into this back end, but I just thought I'd let you know about the 2 different ways. Some people might want to do it. There's designers that really want to be coders and do that sort of thing. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. I'm more bothered about the aesthetics of it and the functionality and getting it to work, making it work for the client, not getting in there and changing and stuff like that.
The last thing is, obviously, I sort of touched on it before. The devices, we have to be mindful. I know earlier on I said that we, so when we're building things at the end of this process, we have to be mindful of all the different devices that this is going to go on. There is, like a lot of those templates I spoke about there, they are responsive. So when you do this website, it will generate a lot of mobile content and all, lots of different sizes, which scales a lot of the elements down to fit all the different devices. If you're building from fresh, you have to build all those individual sites yourself, and the website itself senses, monitors what you're viewing on. But you just have to be mindful of it. You have to think, okay, what if I'm going to do this? Is that going to work? If I'm putting a piece of copy on an image, is that going to work on a phone? So it's about, you know, in that design process phase, thinking about that. You might even want to try it on a little iPhone to see the extremities of, you know, on a laptop and on a phone. So it's just about thinking about the end result. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you for your time, and if there's any questions, then please fire away.
I just get shrug of the shoulders the old true power.